timeline, like who sent back the Terminator to protect Sarah when she was 9. This is entirely different, but it's intriguing. Even by the end of the movie, I was not really sold on Emilia Clarke as Sarah Connor. I think Emilia is a great actress, but for Sarah Connor, I think she was more so just given the role because of her popularity than anything else. I think both her and Jai Courtney as Sarah and Kyle are a miscast. A lot of time is spent trying to develop their relationship through some expositional dialogue. It almost seems like they were
many years now, the Resident Evil series has been a franchise that I wanted to dive into, but I really felt like I was too late to the game. I've heard so many great things about the games, but it also felt like if I played them now, they might not live up to the hype in my head. They're a little outdated, controls and graphics-wise, and since I don't have any nostalgia for them, they might not gain the same special place in my heart that so many other people have for them. There's, of course, the movies, and I've seen a few of them, or at least bits and pieces of a few of them, and I've heard that some of them are better than others, but the real Resident Evil experience is with the games. I'm probably not the only one who felt that way too, because Capcom decided that they were going to revamp these games for a new audience and an audience that missed out on these experiences the first time around. So I've been playing through these remakes and absolutely loving my time in the first playthrough, the second playthrough, and now in my third playthrough, I'm still loving my experience, and that doesn't happen too often. There's been 4 remakes so far. There's the first Resident Evil game, which was remade in 2002, so it's still pretty outdated. And then there's Resident Evil 2, 3, and 4, which started in 2019 with Resident Evil 2 and into this year with Resident Evil 4. So if you're a fan of these games, or if you've never played them, I'm going to be talking about my experiences, what I liked, what I didn't really care for, and some highlights from my playthroughs. So if you want to hear a first-time player's thoughts, then keep on watching through. So grab your healing spray, spend $5 in order to unlock the unlimited ammo weapons, and save your game at a typewriter of all things. And let's talk about the world and story of Resident Evil. So I feel like I should reiterate that I knew absolutely nothing about this franchise. I had seen some gameplay of older games, I had maybe watched 1 or 2 movies on TV, and that was it. So going into Resident Evil 2, my understanding was that Resident Evil was an action game series with some horror elements thrown in there, similar to the films. But from the very beginning portion of the game, walking through the gas station, I knew that I had it completely backwards. This was a survival horror game with some action elements thrown in there, and I couldn't be happier about that. The zombies are absolutely terrifying in this game. You think you killed one, and then you walk by it, and it grabs you and bites you in the leg. The zombies themselves aren't the only scary thing, but I'll get to that in a little bit. I cover a lot of zombies content on this channel: The Walking Dead, Call of Duty Zombies, The Last of Us. Maybe some people will get angry I'm calling them zombies for The Last of Us, but they are essentially zombies. So I've been a bit desensitized to zombies over the years because of how much media I consume around that genre, but Resident Evil 2 felt like a breath of fresh air for me personally, because it went back to the roots of zombies, and that's full-blown horror. In this game, you play as both Leon Kennedy and Claire Redfield. Leon is a rookie at the RPD, and Claire is a civilian. And boy, does this game really make you feel that way. You don't feel like a superhero, you can't get hit too many times or else you're dead, you can't dodge or stand in a fight because you have so little ammo, so you're is to run away like 95% of the time. This game absolutely kicked my ass. So much that when I was playing on the standard difficulty, the game was like, are you sure you don't want to play on easy? I was running out of ammo constantly. I was holding my side as I ran constantly. So yes, alright, I switched to easy difficulty. I thought I was good at video games, but I'm not. Also, this footage is from my second playthrough of the game, so no, I did not use the infinite ammo guns in my first run. I just wanted an easier time to record footage and also look like Rick Grimes in this sheriff uniform. Leon and Claire both have their own separate stories, even though they go through the same areas, but that's where one of the highlights of the game comes in, and that's the level design. While both campaigns share the same locations, they act entirely different based on different locked doors and items that you need to progress earlier or later on in each respective campaign. This type of design allows you to explore the areas differently, look for different clues and items, but going about it in a unique way. It does require a lot of backtracking, which some people aren't a fan of, and I'm usually not, but exploring these areas never really felt like a task to me. I could just take a different route or stop somewhere else that I needed to stop anyways to get something else on my way towards the objective. This game doesn't really hold your hand when it comes to puzzles, which I especially love. Sometimes I was stuck and unsure of what to do or where to go, but with more time exploring, I was able to figure it out, and I liked that there wasn't any check marks or indicators on where to go or how to solve the puzzles. You have to find the locker combinations, write stuff down to remember codes and ciphers, and this adds an element to the game that's challenging, but also fun because of how rewarding the puzzles are. On my first playthrough, I didn't even get one of the guns that Leon has because I just didn't know how to figure out the puzzle. So some of these puzzles made me feel like I'm the dumbest person in the world. I sat at this chess puzzle for the longest time because I could not figure out why the order of the pieces wasn't working, and I found out it was because I thought the king was the queen and the queen was the king. I was really surprised that this game really only had 3 different settings: the RPD, the sewers, and the underground lab. I'm not really sure what I was expecting, a sprawling action game set across the city or going from place to place in each new level like The Last of Us, but this game feels entirely different than any other game I've ever played. It's also very moment to moment. When a cutscene happens, you don't skip ahead in time, you're right where it ended and walking to the next objective. I played Leon's story first and then Claire's, and the storylines of both games kinda confused me. Whoever you play as second gets notes from the other person saying that they've already been there and have subsequently left, but all the puzzles are still there for you to do. You go through the same areas, meet some of the same people, and the timeline gets really confusing. They also barely interact with each other throughout the course of the game. They're together at the start, they meet and flirt outside the gates instead of trying to find a way in with those bolt cutters in your inventory, and then again at the end, but their stories are largely separate from each other. As Leon, you make your way through the RPD and eventually meet Ada Wong, a member of the FBI on her own mission, and you get wrapped up with her. Eventually going underground, where you learn more about the origin of the T-virus and trying to stop it from spreading even further. Leon and Ada have this sort of flirty, backstabby relationship, one that I wasn't too convinced of, but I think for Leon's character, being a rookie and wanting to save everybody and trust everybody and do the right thing, it made sense for his character. As Claire, you once again make your way through the RPD and run into this little girl, Sherry, who happens to be the daughter of Annette and William Birkin. Well, Annette is a terrible mother and William is a monster, so Claire takes it upon herself to go and save this girl, getting out of the city just in time for Leon to catch up with them. I think out of the two, I enjoyed Claire's story more. I think it was the more emotional of the two, but it also might have been due to the fact that it was my second playthrough and I felt more comfortable and confident making my way through the game on my easy difficulty. But I also liked her weapons more out of the two of them, so that also played a big factor. But regardless of who you play as the first time around, the game hints at a different ending if you play through the other person's story, which is a really great incentive to give the other person's story a shot, because otherwise the story kind of just ends. Like I said, I played as Leon the first time around, and when I got on the train to finally see Claire and continue the story with her, she was with this random little girl, and then the story ended.
What's this?
So of course I wanted to see who this girl was and what Claire's story was, and also to see the actual ending of the game. So I think that's about everything. Oh my god, this guy again. I cannot explain to you the pure fear that goes through my mind as soon as this guy
Mr. X pops up. I think in my first playthrough, about 50% of my ammo went to trying to kill this guy, only for him to keep on coming back. Even on additional runs of the game, this guy still makes me shrivel up inside. It's like a scarier looking Terminator coming after you, and I truly cannot give you another time where I have felt this terrified while playing a game. Well, I can think of one, but that's later on. So I've been singing this game's praises, but there are some things that I don't like. Like I said before, the stories and how they combine together doesn't really make that much sense. In one playthrough, Mr. X is killed fairly early on, and in the other, he's the final boss fight. Was there actually two Mr. X's? No, that's a scary thought. Let's move on. The blue herb, absolutely pointless. I think I needed to use this one time across both of my playthroughs, and I kept waiting on when I was going to need it, and I just never really did. Especially in this game when the red and green herbs are your lifeline. Whenever I found a blue one, I just would most of the time leave it on the ground because I already had 5 others in my inventory, and that's where they stayed the entire game. The knife was super annoying. Half the time I'd just forget it or be so surrounded that I couldn't grab it again, and then it'd be gone forever. Also, just the fact that they break in general, I get that you can pick up more of them, it's a gameplay mechanic, but out of all the tedious gameplay mechanics in this game, the knife was really the only one that really bothered me. I'm never really one to complain about frame rates or graphical issues, they don't really bother me too much, but it did happen a lot while I was playing this game, so I guess here I am complaining about them. Then again, it's probably because I'm playing on the Series S. One last thing I really loved, there's typewriters as save game points. As soon as I saw that, I knew that this was some kind of message from the gaming gods that I was in the right place with this series, and that I was. Overall, I'd give this game a solid 9 out of 10. Also, why are there so many of these goddamn fire hydrant things everywhere? I was sure that they were going to be used for something. Am I missing something? Because they didn't do anything. Why are there so many?
I got Nick.
Well done. So I'll check your phone.
Man, sounds good.
Fresh off of finishing RE2, I went over to RE3, expecting the same level of challenge and difficulty, so I went ahead and dropped the difficulty down to easy, though I eventually realized I did not need to play this game on easy. No ammo is no problem in this game. I had so much ammo that it took up like 90% of my inventory, and it kept on dropping, so I was never left running around, clutching my side and avoiding the zombies. I'd go full-on attack mode, stand my ground, and kill every single zombie that I could find, and still have a ton of ammo left over. Resident Evil 3 introduces us to 2 new playable characters. There's Jill Valentine and Carlos Oliveira, and these two, let's just say, they are not rookies or civilians. Jill is actually a returning playable character from the original Resident Evil game. She's a member of the STARS team located in Raccoon City. Jill and Carlos are both pretty great characters. They're a little simple, but they have a nice back and forth between them, and their stories intertwine in a more cohesive and understandable way than Leon's and Claire's did in RE2, so I really liked that. The story of this game is actually pretty similar to RE2. Jill and Carlos are working together to escape the city and stop the virus from spreading any further, though this time there's a cure and they're trying to stop the military from bombing the city. Along the way, they're being chased by an experiment let loose from Umbrella, and that's Nemesis. Jill and Carlos, like I said, they're not rookies. Jill has an ability to dodge, which is a really great addition, and Carlos has this kind of like counter-punch ability, so they both play at least ever so slightly differently, and that was a really great addition. Because they aren't rookies or civilians, they actually do feel a lot like superheroes. They go through crazy stunt sequences, have a lot more ammo and fighting abilities, so this, in essence, does make it feel a lot less scary. It feels like they took Mr. X from the first game, saw how terrifying he was, and made a whole game based around that concept, because Nemesis really feels like a more intense version of Mr. X, but also a slightly less scary version. Because you have the means to deal with him most of the time, aka a lot of ammo, he doesn't feel as terrifying. Now, there are still moments of fear in this game, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't touch the atmosphere or feeling that RE2 had. But
They do actually feel like very similar games in terms of overall feeling. There's the same inventory system, controls, camera, and I really like how these felt. These are remakes, so mostly all the kinks have been worked out and they just kept with the mechanics that work. So the overlap of how they feel, despite being different games, remains the same. Now, this game takes place on the same night as Resident Evil 2, just a little bit before, and also in different locations. So we're getting to see parts of the city and what's going on elsewhere around the time that Leon is probably at the gas station with Claire and driving into the city. So to see a different point of view of Raccoon City other than Claire and Leon's was another aspect of the game that I really enjoyed. Probably my favorite thing about this game is the overlap in locations from Resident Evil 2. You see Carlos travel to the RPD before Leon and Claire get there, so some of the level design is different, and we get to see how the pipes burst and how the wall opens up, and that was really great to see. We also get to see stuff like how Marvin gets bit, and it makes these games feel connected in more ways than just the gameplay. One of the details I really liked was how the locker combinations were the same as they were in RE2. So I remembered a few of them and could just open them right up. If they were different, I'd understand, but it would also be disappointing. These small details really add up and make this world feel that much more realistic and, honestly, for me, more memorable. Jill also travels just outside the RPD and runs into the same man that Leon and Ada would run into later that night. And while these are small things, they stand out to me and make me more invested in this story and this universe. They also got rid of the blue herb, which was fantastic because I didn't have any space for it with all of my extra ammo. The Russian villain is a little bland. His motivation is to get more money, so that was a bit plain, but it still works. This game was really short. It took me around 12 or 13 hours to beat RE2 on my first playthrough, and it took me about 4 hours to beat this one. And that was with me going around looking for items and solving all the puzzles, and that really surprised me. I'm not sure if this was a full-priced game at launch, but if it was, I'd be pretty pissed. There also wasn't really any incentive to go back through and play the story again after you beat it like RE2 had. There's no different ending, there's barely any costumes, so if anything, this game almost felt like a DLC for Resident Evil 2. No wonder why they felt so similar. Apparently there was a lot of cut content from the original game, and that makes sense. If I were a hardcore Resident Evil fan, I'd be pretty upset, but I never played the original version, so I still really enjoyed my playthrough of this game. Even my second playthrough was great to get everything that I didn't get from the first time, and also for this footage, but it's definitely not as great as Resident Evil 2. It's a 7.5 from me. Now, time for the bit.
There's a black cloud that hangs over our family. Lasher's been born. He grows in these wild spurts. Something is very wrong. Oh my God. Lasher's out there hunting my fair woman.
What have you done?
I'm gonna take care of it. Of him.
So, what you do?
It's not a sin to kill the two. Julia knows exactly what's happening.
My father's dead. Whose father? One hands. You should see me.
This is a trap.
You may be in all your hands. You have all that's transmitting orders. The chaos.
This is how it starts. This is where he wants us.
Tired of the heat killing your sleep? The 8-Sleep Pod keeps you cool all night. Whether you want it a little crisp or icy cold, your pod delivers. Just add it to your mattress and unlock individual climate control for each side of the bed, in a touch or a tap. Whether you run hot, just worked out, or are deep in a summer heat wave, no other product cools like the pod can. And you will never feel night sweats again. Order yours today at 8sleep.com.
Big one.
This is really the game that I associate with the Resident Evil franchise, even before I had ever even played it. I had always heard the greatest things about Resident Evil 4. It's one of the best games ever made. It's the best survival horror game. It's everything that's great about Resident Evil. It's peak everything that you could possibly hear. I've heard it before I ever even bought it. So I waited a little bit between playing Resident Evil 2 and 3 and this one. I wanted to try and play it on its own and not constantly compare it to the other remakes because I was really worried that all this hype surrounding it, all the 10s, all the reviews would lead me to expect something more than I would get. So were my worries warranted?
Absolutely fucking not.
So in Resident Evil 4, Leon is tasked with rescuing the president's daughter from a recluse location in Spain. It becomes all about the rescue, multiple times, add in some Harry Potter, some Jurassic Park, some 80s action movie, and that's the story of Resident Evil 4. This game takes both aspects of the other remakes, the horror elements of RE2 and the action elements of RE3, and blends them together in a perfect mix. You have ammo and you're a more trained soldier, but you're also stranded and overwhelmed a lot of the time in this terrifying atmosphere, wherever that might be over the course of the game. This gameplay actually is from my first playthrough, so if it looks like I have no idea what I'm doing, it's because I don't. This game starts you off in a village. You make your way around it and eventually up towards the mountain in the castle, then the underground depths of the castle, and then towards some ruins that are being excavated. And all of these locations feel unique from each other and also massive in comparison to the maps of the other two remakes. I think that Leon is a much better character this time around. Not that there was anything really wrong with him in RE2, but he's just much more experienced and jaded this time around, not as trusting and just smarter. It's easy to see why he became such an iconic character in this franchise after playing this game. The level design is once again amazing and it's at its best here. There's some added verticality in some areas and also further sight lanes that allow for weapons like rifles to actually be used here, and pairing this level design with the atmosphere and the locations that this game brings you through is honestly incredible to play through. It's funny because looking at this game, the location and some of the story elements, it feels like a big departure from the series. It's not Raccoon City, that's for sure, so in some ways, if you looked at this game on paper, setting the story in such a place could be seen as a big departure that may not work, but steps like this are needed in order to grow a franchise, and Resident Evil 4 did exactly that. This game took risks like adding in a store and money system, as well as some more magical elements that weren't present in the other game. This before, there's truly nothing like The Cabin in the Woods. This movie gives a... We've all seen horror movies about a group of friends who go on a little trip in the middle of nowhere. Maybe it's a ski resort or an island of some kind, or most likely some sort of cabin in the woods. So imagine my surprise when I come across one of these movies, literally titled The Cabin in the Woods, about, well, you get the idea. Except The Cabin in the Woods is very unlike any other movie of this genre. While you're usually screaming at the TV telling the character to not do something, this movie gives an explanation as to why these characters always end up making stupid decisions. You see, horror movies have come full circle. We have parody movies about every kind of horror movie known to man. No matter who you are, you always kind of understand where the plot and where the story is going, what's going to happen, the stereotypical characters, and who usually dies first. But by 2012, the formula these movies followed was incredibly stale. And horror movies have made a bit of a resurgence these past couple years. There's all the A24 movies that have the same vibe that creeps you out, but if I'm being honest, is already starting to get a little bit stale. And things like Jordan Peele's movies, which lure
you in with a bit of comedy, only to have a scene that will absolutely traumatize you and make you sleep with the lights on all summer. But before all these, back in the early 2010s, all horror movies were one of two things: a found footage movie or just really, really bad. Most of the times, both. Enter The Cabin in the Woods, which was at all times a parody, incredibly original, and very entertaining. While you might think that you've seen a movie or two like this before, there's truly nothing like The Cabin in the Woods. So grab your weaponized bong, travel to the desolate woods with your stereotypical group of friends, and let's choose our own death in The Cabin in the Woods. So if you're walking into this movie not knowing anything about the film, the opening scene is a little strange. Doesn't seem like a movie titled The Cabin in the Woods. In fact, maybe I'm just watching the wrong movie. Okay, never mind. Then we're introduced to a gang of college students, each of them more stereotypical than the next. We have the sweet, nice girl, who is usually the last one to survive in movies like this. The, how do I put this? Good-looking blonde girl, the brainless jock, the conspiracy theory stoner who hates the government, and the nice guy who usually falls for the sweet innocent girl and sacrifices himself. Cop in an RV and we come on a illegal gas station where the creepy old owner they continue to alert the cabin that there is nothing in this pod, but something is completely off about the road. We also get some more insight into this strange office storyline, but still no indication as to how all of this has actually been connected. While on the surface, everything we've seen so far from friends seems very
Fucking jeez.
Obviously a very dumb movie type of response, and even Marty knows that something is up with that. In the offices, we get a bit more insight into everything. We're still not fully sure what they're talking about, or more importantly, why they're doing it. They do say that the people upstairs don't care about the betting as long as everything goes according to plan. They say that they can rig the situation as much as possible, like the doors to the basement being blasted open, then some little shoes, which is exactly what happens next. In the basement, there's a ton of strange objects and artifacts. Everyone mindlessly picking them up and starts flying around with them, until Dana calls up the bookkeeping journal and she starts reading the entries of a little girl telling her gruesome stories about her family, and it freaks everyone out, but nonetheless, she continues reading. Marty starts hearing whispers of some voice telling her to continue reading, so he tries to stop her, but Kurt says, whatever, it's harmless, just keep on going. So she does exactly that. The zombie redneck torture family swings the life out of the ground. We head to the office, where we find out that this is exactly what they were all betting on, and that maintenance and the intern gets this correctly, so they win the pot. We then see the board of all the possibilities. There's, werewolf, vampire, zombies, clowns, but there's also some different ones like witches, different from the sexy witches right after it, and also Kevin. Bradley is a little aggravated because he wanted there to be a mermaid, but at least the Buckner family has a little person near its root. They seem to have some sort of feud with Japan, who also always has 1% near its right. And then we see that this, or stuff exactly like this, is happening all over the world. The picture is becoming a bit clearer. We still don't know why all of this is happening. They do talk about remnants of the old world, and how nightmares come from these stories, not the other way around, like Truman usually says. Well, let's go back to this board, because it has some cool Easter eggs from the movies, like the Deadites and the Angry Molesting Tree, two things clearly inspired from Evil Dead, which makes you think that maybe Evil Dead has some sort of secret underground office crew watching them as well.
Jeez, no way, bro.
Uniting some popcorn references like the
Oh
Sugar
my
Plum
fucking
Fairy.
god,
I also
bro.
love how Sasquatch, Wendigo, and Yeti are all under the same category for some reason. But perhaps even more interesting than the board is the glimpse we see into what's happening in Japan in some sort of school classroom, and we get glimpses of some other places too from all around the world. Each of these reference to another different horror movie, and all of this is still leading us to the question, why? Marty talks to Dana and says that something is up here, because Jules is acting way dumber than usual, and Kurt is now some sort of dumb jock, even though he's on full academic scholarship. Dana dismisses it, and we see Jules and Kurt up in the woods. All of the office workers are waiting for their classic horror movie moment that involves dogs, but she says that the mood isn't quite right, so the office does everything they can to get her a mood. Therapy, a bit of pheromone mist, raising the temperature and the light, letting them show that they need to.
Oh my god, no fucking way.
And then the Buckner show. They kill Jules, and we see that the office workers aren't entirely harmless. They begin praying to some sort of entity before pulling a lever, which unleashes a vial of blood that's going somewhere. Marty continues hearing the voices and goes for a walk, interrupting a moment between Dana enrolling in the process, and just as one of the Buckners is about to approach him, Kurt runs in and clotheslines her, telling everyone that Jules is dead.
Got passion and determination. We set our sights on something, you better believe it.
Always felt like our content was all about entertainment, but there's also this professional business side. One of the things that we use basically is essential to getting our investor to be able to actually see how that initial movie has delivered. We always have this vision of bringing things
And the Buckners come in swinging, but Kurt insists that they stay together and go room to room to make sure everything is barred off. This bothers the workers, but then they pump some more mist into the cabin and Kurt changes his mind, saying that maybe they should split up after all. They run into their own separate rooms and the doors lock behind them, and Marty ends up finding a camera. Before the office takes drastic measures, Judah Buckner comes to the rescue and snatches Marty from the window, who thinks that he's on some sort of reality TV show, and another lever is
I get the
pulled.
server
Holden and
name.
Dana use the mirror to reunite, and then they head in the basement. The same basement from the Buckner Journal, where Dana thinks that they're gonna die. But after the Buckner family continues their assault, Dana fights back and kills one of the zombies. But she can't continue being armed, so they press a button and zap the knife out of her hand. Kurt comes to the rescue, and they all escape the cabin, leaving behind Jules and Marty, who have both been claimed by the Buckners. This is really the part of the movie that shows how clever this plot really is. Whenever the characters are making good decisions, the office has to step in and make sure that they don't continue doing that. Kurt says that no matter what, they all have to stick together. It's something that you never really hear in a horror movie because it's smart. So with the push of a few buttons, that decision is changed. Dana successfully fends off an attack, and the smart thing to do would be for everybody to grab some sort of weapon that's in that basement, but with the click of a few buttons, that decision is changed. While these types of horror movies are usually infuriating to watch because the characters make all these dumb decisions, you can't really be mad here because that's literally what they're trying to do. The characters are trying to make good choices, but they're being forced to do otherwise, which is a great piece of commentary on the horror genre in general, and makes each scene that much more entertaining to see how the office is going to interfere next. We see that Japan has now failed their attempt to please the ancients for the first time ever, as have all the other countries. It's now solely up to America to get this job done. And that's an issue because the rest of the group is headed to leave, and the tunnel is completely fine even though it was supposed to have collapsed hours ago. There's a race on both ends, and the tunnel ultimately does end up collapsing. There's a small gap between them and the other side, so Kurt gets on his dirt bike to cross the gap, promising to come back with cops and choppers and really large guns to take out the rest of the zombies. And as he makes the jump, it seems that he's gonna make it until he hits that same force field from earlier and falls into the abyss below. Dana realizes that Marty's crazy, stoned ramblings were correct and that there's puppeteers controlling what happens. They try to think of a plan to go forward, but then the Buckners continue their attack, and the RV goes off the road and into the water. The office starts celebrating, saying that the Virgin doesn't actually have to die, she can be the final girl, she just has to suffer in the process. Hadley starts getting a little bit sentimental, saying that he's actually rooting for her, but then quickly stops in his tracks. Everyone starts celebrating their accomplishments as the screen in the background shows Dana getting horribly beaten, but then the phone rings and everybody goes silent because apparently not everyone died according to plan. Just as Dana is about ready to be done in, Marty comes in and saves her, brings her into a small underground room which has an elevator in it. They start going down, and then sideways, where they encounter a werewolf, and then a ghost. And then we pull back and see all of the different monsters that could have attacked them had they chosen a different artifact other than the Buckner's journal. I really like the scene of them going to escape only for the tunnel to still be intact. While it seems like the office workers have everything under control and they're just doomed from the start, this gives the audience a tiny bit of hope that maybe they'll be able to escape if they can just get out in time, only to lose that hope when the tunnel does come crashing down. But then Kurt actually has a semi-solid plan, and it doesn't seem like the office is affecting this scene at all, and if there was no interference, he probably would have escaped. But just as we saw earlier, this was not an option of escape, and it's not like Dana or Holden would have made it if they stayed in the RV, since the Buckner was already in there waiting for them. But the office scenes are all really cool.
Every time a girl leaves anywhere, actors here take off his shirt and he's totally ripped. I can't relate to that. I want to see someone who looks more like me.
No. Count me out of that. Because if I took my shirt off right now, you'd all quake in your boots.
Do not do that.
But you know what? I got a story for you, a comeback story about a real-life hero, a guy named Paul. Different Paul Rivera from the Bronx. Growing up, sure, he got in some trouble, but he always wanted something better. So right out of high school, he joins the Army. Gets strong as an ox, picks up skills, comes back to town. One of the countless hard-working citizens that keep our fair city going. Later in life, he finds the perfect gal. Gets married, has kids. Paul Rivera's a decent American guy, you could say.
I love my life. I feel like I've done everything right. So, where's the rub?
Suddenly, Paul starts getting winded all the time. Can't catch his breath.
Was he a smoker?
No, pulmonary fibrosis.
Across the whole movie, they add a great bit of levity and comedy to everything, while also not treating the situation they're dealing with like a joke. It's just clearly not their first time they're doing this, so they aren't as stressed out like the new guy Truman is. Truman is kind of the audience's view into this world. This is very clearly his first time on the job, so he doesn't want to partake in the betting pool, and he's also kind of disgusted by the way everybody acts and talks about what's happening. Now, the scene showing all the different boxes of monsters is probably the most iconic shot of the movie. There's, again, some more references to other movies and properties, like The Witch from Left 4 Dead. And I almost guarantee that if this movie was made today, there would be some sort of cheap cameo involving, like, Jason or Chucky or some sort of monster that the audience is familiar with as a way of trying to tie together some new cinematic universe or multiverse. But this was made in 2012. So this is a very self-contained story with only references. There's no need for cameos, so this movie doesn't have them. We can put two and two together and see that other movies with characters who do stupid things might have some sort of office betting pool going against them. And if you watch other horror movies with that lens, especially the bad ones, it actually makes them way more enjoyable. The office workers freak out, saying that Marty needs to be killed before the girl or the whole plan is foiled. They take down a security officer and walk through the facility, a voice over the loudspeaker telling them that there's something much bigger at stake here and they need to let them finish the job. So an army of armed guards comes in to take them out, but Dana unleashes the army of monsters on them, where we get what is probably the second most iconic shot of the movie, the elevator's opening and the horde of monsters being unleashed. This whole entire next sequence is incredibly fun, seeing all the different monsters running around the facility that a few hours earlier people were celebrating their victory in. It's incredibly satisfying to watch because all of these people, besides Truman, didn't really have any problem killing the others. Hadley finally gets to see a merman up close, and just as Dr. Novak goes to get away, Dana takes him out, and he begs her to kill Marty before it's too late. They continue running along the corridor when they find the offering chamber. And then Sigourney Weaver comes out of nowhere and explains everything. How the ancients require a ritual sacrifice of stereotypical people to keep their slumber. Ripley tries to convince her to kill Marty so that way the world can continue being at peace, because if he survives, the whole world suffers. Dana holds up the gun to Marty, but is attacked by a werewolf before she can pull the trigger. Marty and Ripley fight for a moment before little girl Buckner comes in and saves him. And the two of them wait it out before the ancients rise up and the movie ends. I mean, this entire third act is a lot of fun. It's great to see all the different monsters that we could have seen but didn't in action, and it makes you wonder how different things could have gone if any number of these other creatures had been in charge instead of the Buckner family. We still never got to see Kevin, so that's a shame, but we did get to see a number of other things from the board instead. Now, the whole movie really leads up to this final confrontation, and I think that the ending itself is just okay. Like, I don't really blame Dana for pointing the gun at Marty. I mean, it's your friend or the fate of the entire world, and it's not like you, as the final girl, are going to go on and live a happy life after all this. You're probably not even going to make it out of this alive anyways. Might as well save the rest of the world. And Sigourney Weaver coming in at the last minute is, again, a little strange. Now, they do talk about the people upstairs quite a bit in this movie, but we know very little about these people upstairs, and what does that even mean? Because the people upstairs are technically the people in the cabin. I think that this was just a cool way to get a big actor in a cameo, which was exactly the plan, because the other actors they had in mind were Bruce Campbell and Jamie Lee Curtis. But they ultimately got Sigourney Weaver to sign on for a day, so they added this character in. But I ultimately think it causes more questions about everything than it gives answers. And I'm all for questions at the end of the movie. I think it makes the story live on longer, but this just feels weird to me, especially with how the movie ended. I feel like there were a lot of ways to do this ending to... Are you ready?
I was a genius. I've always been kind of an Apple nerd. I just wanted to help people and fix things.
Something doesn't make sense. In that bubble, you don't realize what else is out there.
Samsung is way pixel option, which is crazy.
So how can I be a genius?
I voluntarily left the Apple ecosphere. I love my Samsung. That amount of detail is insane. I can frame that.
We're gonna let Galaxy AI fill in the image and see how I look without a mustache. Like, hello?
I've heard good things about Samsung's night mode. Holy cow!
That's from when the lights were on.
You didn't know. That's just now. I feel like I said too much.
On future sequels, like having it be ambiguous as to whether or not Data kills Marty, but then cut to another year later and have stay with a sequel have when it comes to horror movies, if the ending was just a little bit different. But it seems pretty unlikely that a sequel will ever come from this because, as director Drew Goddard says, I haven't had the idea that makes me go, oh, we have to drop everything and do that now. So will we have a sequel filled with cameos of other popular film franchises? Possibly, but as of right now, there's nothing planned. I still think that The Cabin in the Woods is such a unique horror movie. The commentary it has on horror movies in general and the fun ways they play around with it makes this movie really satisfying to watch unfold. And the entire third act makes rewatching the film that much more enjoyable, so that way you can try and catch some new monster or reference that you didn't catch last time. Overall, I'm going to give The Cabin in the Woods an 8.5 out of 10. What are your thoughts on The Cabin in the Woods? Let me know down in the comments below, and let me know what movie you want to see me do next. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more stuff like this. Special thanks to my channel members. You guys are the best, and I will see you all in the next one.
Poverty is more of a political question than it is an economic.
Before James Wan's The Conjuring universe, but after his work in the Saw universe, he started another nightmare-inducing universe with Insidious. Given that we're going to return to this universe this year with Insidious 5, it's time to look back at the franchise so far. So if you're looking to catch up with the events, or if you've never seen them before but want to watch Insidious 5, or maybe you're too scared to watch them for yourself, and that's fine. Whatever the reason may be, I've got you covered. I made another video like this with all the movies in the Conjuring universe, so you should check that out if you haven't already. These videos are going to be very similar in that I'm going to go over each movie, giving you all the
Man, how you
information
got
you need to
that
know, as well
mask
as my
on?
own
That shit is
review
fire.
before I get into how everything connects. If you just want to check out that portion of the video, it's time-coded, so feel free, but you might be a little confused. So we start off with the first entry in this weird, mind-bending, and spine-chilling universe with the first film. So grab a snack and try to sit back and relax. Maybe turn the lights on for this one as we journey through the world of Insidious. So our first movie more or less starts off like most other horror movies
Come
do.
on, why is this
Family
shit? Why is
moves into a house that turns out to be haunted.
this shit is
The wife
pissing me
starts
off?
experiencing some paranormal activity, and the husband isn't too quick to believe her. And this seems like a pretty generic horror movie that I've seen a ton of times before. But it's the nuances and the blend of genres and tropes that make Insidious stand apart. Pretty early on, their son Dalton gets put into a coma. We don't exactly know why that is. Doctors can't seem to figure it out. We just know that he encountered whatever kind of monster, ghost, demon is in the attic, and boom, is in a
That's so
coma.
much
But if the
fucking
house is
head,
haunted,
bro.
why not just move away? Come on, we've all said it in every horror movie. So in this one, that's exactly what they do. But the hauntings don't stop there. As a last resort and almost desperation at this point, the Lambert family calls on paranormal
That
expert
just do this for no fucking
The
reason,
introduction
bro.
to Elise becomes a very pivotal point in both the franchise, but also what makes this movie stand apart. Elise explains that their son Dalton is a gifted astral projectionalist, meaning that while he's sleeping, his mind can wander into a different realm called the Further. Dalton wandered so far into the Further that it's responsible for
all kinds of different spirits, hence all the ghosts that the family has been seeing. Dalton inherited this gift from his father, Josh, and we know that Josh once had to meet with Elise to get his own mind back from the Further. Since Josh is the only one who knows how to do this, it's up to him to travel to this place and get his son back. And though his son makes it back, it seems that Josh did not. Now, this movie is through and through a James Wan film. It pays respect to the genre itself, but also takes a lot of the tropes and spins them on their head. This is a very typical horror movie at first glance, but the deeper the story goes, the more different it gets.
I'm there trying to play, like, what the fuck?
With Josh having to astral project his body into a different realm because he's the only one who knows how to do it, even though he's reluctant to do so and even believe all of this at first, it gives Josh a pretty typical hero's journey type of structure. And while some people may not like that aspect, I think it's pretty cool to mix in your typical adventure storyline.
I got you. I'm not gonna front. I was on his team twice. I took 2 L's with this nigga. I've been in the park for like 2 hours. Boy, you wearing a coat in the middle of a basketball game. Shut your silly ass up. You wearing a pink coat. Shut your silly ass up, nigga. You do. Yellow, fall back. Let them play. You heard? Let them play. Let them play. Fall back. Yellow, fall back. Now I got a West Sign.
start to notice small things like how Josh doesn't have any family photo albums of his childhood while Renee does. And Josh's mom says that she's surprised Renee got him to stand still for a single photograph. These small foreshadowing moments make both watch that much more rewarding. And the same definitely goes for the rest of the series as well. The music in this film is nothing less than bone-chilling. It almost sounds as if somebody took all the instruments that they could carry and just dropped them on the floor in a long, empty hallway, and that's the soundtrack. It doesn't sound like it would be good, and it might not be, I'm not too sure, but it certainly gets the job done to deliver the scares in this film. Speaking of scares, I think that this movie has like the best jump scare of all time. For Chet.
That's why I spun back. I'm here. I'm trying to give my son a dub, you feel me? That's why I came back. My son playing his heart out.
Audiences, I think that this jump scare, the demon Darth Maul, is like the highest ever recorded heart rate jump, and no one else would ever have been able to achieve that except for James Wan. Watching this movie after I've watched all the Conjuring films, I can see the clear inspiration that this movie had for the first Conjuring film.
I bet. Yes, sir. Oh, that 2K got me. Yeah. Nigga did 1,000 moves for no reason. Mm. I'm here. That's some bullshit.
Have a team of ghost
That's
hunters,
some
see
bullshit.
the evil spirits. Patrick Wilson, if anything, Insidious feels a
That
bit
shit
like
getting
a
me
proof of
tight.
concept
Nah, I need my
for
W,
Road Trip.
nigga.
Although this one does have a bit more of the fantastical aspects.
I don't
to it.
like
While
taking
it's
2
not
in a row.
extremely
That
noticeable,
shit make me feel
it
like
is starting to become apparent
that
this
shit feel like a
movie was
Diddy
made
party.
13 years ago. Some of the more supernatural effects have aged just a bit, but it's only like 1 or 2
That's crazy.
great scenes, so it's not that bad. Patrick Wilson once again proves how great of an actor he is in this film, particularly in the second half of the film. Overall, I really like the blend of classic heroic tropes with the
I'm
horror
really
genre. I think it does
like,
a great job at
what we
subverting the
doing,
horror tropes
like.
as well. I really like the ending. It's very open-ended and leaves us on a huge cliffhanger, but luckily for us, we don't have to wait because there's Insidious Chapter 2. I give the first Insidious movie an 8.5 out of 10.
This is the Google Pixel 9. These are some restaurants Dan just suggested, and this is you holding down a button and having Gemini put these restaurants on a map. Nice. That works.
We start off with a flashback to a young Josh Lambert getting help from a younger Elise, giving some greater context to the first movie and how all of Josh's hauntings actually started. There's some strange happenings that we witness in Josh's childhood home, and not all of it makes a ton of sense. But at the end, Josh forgets about all of his abilities and all the strange happenings, which sets the stage for the first movie. But after the intro, Insidious Part 2 picks up right where the first one left off. And while the first one ended on a pretty big cliffhanger, the answer isn't exactly as crazy as it was made out to be. But we continue forward after the death of Elise. Renee gives her side of the story to the police, who tell her that they're waiting on some fingerprints to see if her husband Josh is the one who killed Elise. The Lamberts move on with their lives, but the hauntings don't stop. It's here where the storylines start to branch off.
Yeah, Gengar, facts.
Guys who work with Elise, I learned their names are Specs and Tucker in this one because they have a much bigger role, and they work with one of Elise's old colleagues named Carl. Renee continues getting haunted by the strange occurrences at Josh's enormous and strangely lit childhood home, while Carl, Lorraine, Specs, and Tucker dig deeper into the backstory of Josh's childhood haunting. It's then revealed that Josh isn't actually Josh, and he's stuck in the further. Lorraine gets Renee out of the house while boys have to plan to sedate Josh that goes horribly wrong. Carl meets the real Josh in the further, and with the help of Elise and eventually Dalton, Josh makes it back to his body in time to reunite with his family. He and Dalton forget about their abilities once and for all, and they move on with their life. But just like the ending of the first film, oh my god, hey look, it's Jenna Ortega. Somebody notices something horrifying, and it's another cliffhanger. Like every sequel in the world, Insidious Chapter 2 goes much bigger with its story this time around. And for the most part, a lot of these grand plots pay off very well. There's obviously something off with Josh for the first half of the film, and it's pretty obvious that he's possessed by the woman in black. No, not that woman in black, but the actual backstory of who this person is executed very well and gives good reason for the dual storylines in the film. James Wan is once again a masterful horror director, and he builds suspense with his use of cinematography incredibly well. This film also blends in some found footage aspects because of Specs and Tucker using their cameras, and while I think these scenes were only added because found footage was really popular at the time, it actually has aged incredibly well and is a pretty unique tool used throughout the film. Specs and Tucker are once again used for comedic relief, and I think for the most part their comedic moments are well placed, but there's a few moments that kind of take away from the tension of the moment. The use of the further in this film is so incredibly well done. It adds a ton of different dimensions to both this story and the grander story of the universe. I mentioned that not everything makes sense in the prologue of the film, and that's because the modern day Josh actually goes back in time in the further to ask his past self more questions about the ghost that's haunting him. This is a very cool scene and gives you a lot more questions about the further, but easily the best scene in the film is when Josh, in the further, goes to visit the house from the first movie, and it explains a lot of the hauntings that we saw in that film. In the first film, these moments are your pretty standard horror movie moments. Josh goes to close the door, goes away, comes back to see the door open. Pretty scary stuff. But this film adds so many extra layers to both this sequel and the first movie. This basically proves that time is like a fifth dimension in the further, and that poses a lot more questions than answers. There's also another moment in the further when Elise comes in to save the day, when she explains to them that there's another place after the further, a better place, but she's come back to help them since she heard them calling. This is obviously referring to some kind of afterlife, but it's not done in an overly religious context, and I like that. Whether you're religious or not, I think we would all like to think that there's some kind of afterlife, and the further is not exactly that afterlife we're looking for, so this single line adds a lot to this universe and even more questions, but this one might be one of those times where questions don't always need to be answered. While there's no jump scare on par with this one,
when you want privacy to be fun and simple, Surfshark has got you covered. Surfshark, an easy way to stay private online. All tape can think is a tighter grid will give that banner more game.
in this movie there's a moment that I think is even more terrifying without even needing to be a jump scare. Like I mentioned, there's something strange going on with Josh, and we don't really know what that is until about halfway through the movie. But throughout the first half of the movie, Renee keeps hearing somebody play the piano, and she realizes that it's the song she wrote for Josh. But when she confronts Josh about this, he has no idea what this song is, and he kind of just brushes off the conversation. We later see Josh talking to somebody at the piano for a minute before getting up to walk away. There's a quick flash to the further where we see the real Josh screaming for help and attention while playing that song on the piano. This moment didn't make me jump at all, but it sent shivers down my spine. This was the first time that we actually see the real Josh in the movie, and to see him in such distress, not knowing what he's gone through in the further, and also knowing he's been trying to communicate with Renee for the whole movie, is deeply terrifying. There's a big rule in the horror genre that the more you show the monster, the less scary it is. It's why the first Blair Witch movie never showed the monster, because your imagination is far scarier than anything that any filmmaker could ever bring to screen. The same rings true for this scene. The storyline was already split into two segments in this film. If you added a third of Josh in the further, then this scene isn't very scary, and it doesn't quite pack the emotional punch that it does right now. Chapter 2 continues to develop these characters into real people that we can actually root for, maybe just because it's Patrick Wilson, and I think he's a fantastic and supremely underrated actor, but Josh is a very good character and an easy person to root for. Dalton also gets a moment to shine in a revenge kind of way, going back into the further to get his father back, and this mirrors the ending of the first film really well. Elise proves to be really popular, getting a moment to come in at the last second and save Josh and Carl, and for a new character, Carl is also a really likable dude. It's very hard to make likable horror movie characters, but Conjuring, James Wan proves that he has the ability to do it. The ending of the film is actually really beautiful. After everything that this family has been through, they finally get their happy ending. I just wish that the storyline itself, Josh being trapped in the Upside Down, wasn't actually resolved until a third movie.
Facts, that shit gonna mean everything to him. Nah, I'm slogging around. I gotta play. Yo, I am fucking weak. Hold on.
I think this film does a very good job as a sequel. There's a few aspects that aren't as great as the first film, but there's also a few aspects that weren't in the first film that are fantastic. All around, I'd say this movie lived up to the expectations of the first film. I'd give it an 8.2 out of 10. But because James Wan did such a reasonable job at crafting the character of Elise, and because both Insidious movies were such a hit, the third movie was greenlit, landing us at Insidious Part 3. Insidious Chapter 3 gives us a prequel, not specifically about Elise, but about a random family that gets Elise back involved in this business, because apparently she left the business sometime after she helped Josh, but before she helped Dalton. A girl named Quinn comes to Elise to talk about her mother, who recently passed away. Elise reluctantly says yes, asking Quinn some things about her mother, and Quinn tells her that her mom loved old music. And what's sitting in the background? A jukebox. Oh, I wonder what's gonna... Oh, jukebox actually never goes off. Okay, maybe I'm not as smart as I think I am, or maybe this movie is just dumb. Anyways, Elise has some kind of episode that says, yep, I'm not gonna help you out. But Quinn starts getting haunted, and Elise comes back into the fold to save the day. The worst thing I can say about this movie is that it doesn't feel like an Insidious film. While the first two films, especially the first one, had pretty standard horror movie tropes, they subverted these tropes in really clever ways. This film doesn't do that. This is a very standard horror movie, and all the things that make this a prequel are really the best parts. In being a prequel, this movie succeeds. We get some greater context on Elise, who recently lost her husband, which makes her afterlife line in part 2 all the more great. We see how Specs and Tucker met Elise and how they all started working together. And there's a lot of moments of foreshadowing that make a lot of sense if you've seen the first two films. But all of these prequel aspects are just the B plot of the movie. The main plot is not very good. Quinn isn't immediately a very likable protagonist. In fact, I was more with the dad the whole movie. This guy was clearly trying his best to raise two kids, work a full-time job, and grieve the passing of his wife all at the same time. And the daughter tells her friend how much she hates her dad, and I just felt bad for the guy. The further comes back in this film, and it's where Elise gives it that name, and it proves to still be the most interesting aspect aspect of this universe. I feel like in a lot of different horror movies, there's always this like other side or ghosts that have to come from somewhere, and The Further is a physical manifestation of that other side. And while a lot of times it's better not to have answers to all of our questions when it comes to these things, The Further does an incredible job.
I want the mascot. Give me the mascot. Let me take on the mascot. I want the mascot. Give me the mascot. Come here, doggy. We chilling, nigga. We here. I don't know. I got the mascot. I got the mascot. Oh, you gotta finish. Extra pass. Extra pass, man. Extra pass. Hold on, man. You should have waited. Give me the ball. Give me the ball. I want ISO. I want ISO on the mascot. I want ISO on the mascot. Pull up, doggy, doggy. We out. We out. Woo! Alrighty. ISO, ISO, ISO. Mascot, mascot, mascot. Give the mascot the dog. I mean the rock. Give the mascot the rock. I want to see what he working with. Pause. Yeah. Again. Do it again. Another ISO. He won it. That was his shot. He won it. Pink, give her the ball, bro. Stop being a ball hog, man. Goddamn ball hog. You gotta pop. ISO. Move, nigga. Yeah, man. That's it. Yeah, come on. That's it. I didn't even see the shot clock. Come on. If you got the ball at 2 seconds, put it up. Don't pass it. Ah, niggas cheat me. Goddamn shame. Good shit.
Of showing us how this universe works, and this is a very unique aspect that really only the Insidious films have. Even when we get to see the Further, everything about it isn't explained, and there's always new layers added in each film, and I hope that trend continues and doesn't get overly explained, because it doesn't need to be. This film came out in 2015, and maybe it's because the technology was better, or maybe because this film had almost 10 times the budget that the first film had, but the special effects are certainly better, and this film doesn't feel nearly as aged as the previous two when it comes to the effects. As much as I think the main plot of the film is pretty generic, the ending of this film is very emotional and combines all the plots and the aspects from the Further to give us a very strong ending. At the end of the movie, all the dots are connected, we have all the answers to our questions in terms of the prequel aspects, but wait, this is an Insidious film. There needs to be a giant cliffhanger ending, so we'll add in a really weird CGI face of the demon from the first film, because then it connects to the first film somehow, I guess. But this demon wasn't haunting Elise, it was haunting Dalton, so why would it be in her house? This was clearly just to somehow try and tie these movies together, but it's not really needed. We see Carl talking to Elise about Josh and the woman that was haunting him, and now subsequently her, and that's enough to connect these films together. If anything, this jump scare of the demon doesn't make any sense. I really feel like the Conjuring films were like the fully realized versions of the Insidious films, because the Conjuring movies always had a really clever way to connect the universe together. And so far, this movie didn't really have any clever way to connect anything. This jump scare didn't make any sense, and it was clearly just put in to make you go, oh look, it's the demon from the first movie. Let's go home and watch Insidious 1 now. But in terms of the actual story, there was no reason to put this demon here. What would have been a good ending? Well, Elise has been talking about her husband the whole film and how much she wanted to see him again. Then Elise thinks that he put this sweater on the bed for her, but the dog starts barking. Elise gets all curious, and that's when the jump scare happens. But if they kept all of these aspects, take out the jump scare, and then have Elise's face drop her curiosity and then smile, then that could have been the end. That gives you some questions that are open-ended with a pretty obvious conclusion in your mind, and it also subverts the expectations of the fans of these films, because there's been a pretty needless jump scare and cliffhanger ending in all three of these films now. I think what disappoints me the most about this film is that it's called Insidious Chapter 3. This is very much not Chapter 3. It's more like Chapter 0, because there's absolutely no resolution for the cliffhanger ending of
Whenever heartburn strikes, get fast relief with Tums. It's time to love food back. Also try new Tums Gummy Bites.
With Pizza Hut's $7 deal lovers menu, we're giving you all your favorites for just $7 each and 7 whole seconds to scan this QR code and order. You got this. You've been scanning QR codes for years. This is your moment. No one outpaces the hype.
the second film. And if the ending of the second film was telling us the demon from the first film was coming back, then the ending of this movie is the exact same thing. Overall, there's some good aspects in this film, but it's nowhere near the quality of the first two. I'll give it like a 6 out of 10. So Insidious: The Last Key is yet another prequel, but a sequel to the last movie. This one takes us back to Elise's childhood, where her abusive father locks her in the basement because he thinks Elise is just trying to scare her brother with all of her ghost stories because he doesn't believe in her abilities. After a pretty extensive prologue, we're brought back to, well, not modern day Elise because she's dead, but after the last movie, before the first movie. She gets a call from a man who's now living in her childhood home asking for her help. So her, Specs, and Tucker take a drive to Five Keys, New Mexico to confront the demons of the past. Along the way, she reunites with her estranged brother and her nieces that didn't know about her, nieces that also share her abilities. I think what works with this movie is that it's not too focused on being a prequel, and it's telling its own story. The last movie was a little too focused on things being a prequel and setting up a lot of future events, whereas this one just completely centers on Elise, which I find to be a bit funny. Elise is like the pillar of this franchise, yet she died at the end of the first movie, so she's been in all 4 of these, but dead since the end of the first one. This kind of goes along with my opinion that all prequels just kind of suck. There's inherently less stakes, and while there can be some interesting events or stories, they never carry as much weight behind them because we know nothing horrible is going to happen to these characters. But where this movie succeeds is the twist that happens about halfway through. I won't spoil too much. The story was at least semi-interesting beforehand, since you have characters like Elise, Specs, and Tucker in the front seat. But when the twist happened, I was thoroughly surprised, and it made the viewing experience of the movie that much better afterwards. Talking about Specs and Tucker, I've really grown a soft spot for them over the course of the franchise. They each have their own unique quirks, and while they're not like multi-layered characters with a lot of depth, there was a moment in the beginning of the movie where I thought that they weren't going to be in it for very long, but then they tagged along with Elise on her journey, and I was very happy that they were going to be there. So I didn't really know I was going to miss them until I thought they were going to be gone. As for the story of this film itself, it's weirdly the most supernatural and least grounded movie of the franchise. While every film goes into a strange spirit realm, they all seem to be at least a little bit grounded in regards to being a supernatural horror movie. This one has the demon turn off the screams in people's bodies with a key, and that just seems like something that would have never happened in the first film. Is this a good thing? A bad thing? I don't really know, kind of up for you to decide. It did strike me as a bit strange in comparison to the last 3 films, but nothing that really kept me out of the story. The most disappointing thing in this film is that the further takes a back seat. There's maybe like 5 total minutes that they spend in the further, which is by far the least amount of time that they've spent there in all the movies. It doesn't really add anything new when it comes to this really interesting other side. There is a weird moment towards the end of the movie where they open a red door and it takes us to where Dalton falls off the ladder in the attic from the first movie, but then they leave and there's no further explanation of this scene. Was this put in just to connect the dots a bit more? Because if you remember, this is the scene where Dalton screams, and right after this he's put in a coma, but Elise didn't do anything to him. The only thing I can think of is that she left the door open, and then the demon from the first film came and got him from there, but otherwise there's no explanation at all. Speaking of the demon from the first film, this film, The Last Key, makes the ending of the third film make absolutely no sense. Why was there this jump scare of the demon like it was following Elise around if it wasn't going to be in this movie? And I guess it kind of is in this movie, but only because the ending of this movie leads directly into the first movie. So the ending to the last movie makes even less sense than it already did. Unless you're trying to say that the demon was following Elise around, and when she opened the door to Dalton, the demon went in and started haunting Dalton instead, all because she didn't close the door, and Dalton's haunting would then be her own fault. But that's a lot of logical hoops to jump through for something that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. This film came out in 2018, and by that point, the Conjuring universe was well underway, having multiple entries and spin-offs that all connect. And when I realized this, I realized that Insidious was trying to do the very same thing with this movie, and possibly some others as well. This is the lowest rated movie of the franchise, but still did very well financially, and honestly, I think 5.7 is a little too low. It should be right there as like a 6.1 with Insidious Chapter 3, and the first two movies have criminally low ratings to begin with. Now for the moment you've all been waiting for, how all of these movies connect together. Maybe some of you just skipped ahead to this moment in time. If you did, that's fine. Welcome. Though a lot of this may not make video, I'll try my best.